Good.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see the audience
Yeah,
when you're sitting from here.
Well, they're smiling.
Which is comforting though. So
Yeah.
you can say what you want and you don't see how the
Bright
reaction
lights,
is.
exactly what I needed after last time.
Okay, so we have our next discussion, and obviously we've been talking a lot about technologies, content, modular, not modular, etc., etc. So I think it's a timely topic. But before we do so, let's do a quick round of introductions, starting with our dear ladies.
Hi, I'm Shiv. Nice to meet you all from Astellas, and I head up our Omnichannel strategy and excellence team.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanitha. I work with Novo Nordisk as the global customer engagement strategy lead for cardiovascular and emerging therapy areas.
Hi everyone, my name's Hugh. I also work at Astellas. I'm responsible for our global content strategy.
And my name is Gareth Worthington. I work at UCB, and I'm the head of the Global Clearance Center of Excellence, which means nothing to anybody. You can think of us as an MLR factory. That's what we are.
Nice, nice, nice. So a lot of big words. I heard, first of all, the word strategy. And obviously we know strategy, it all starts with strategy in realizing your business goals. So you mentioned, Shivani, strategy. So how are you tackling, from a global to local perspective, related to content, a strategic vision, so that everyone is aligning to that?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. So at Astellas, I think we were all aligned on the importance of having a content operating model that would allow us to create strategic messaging globally, but also kind of deploy that and scale that through global content capabilities. So recently, actually, we've deployed what we have as our global for local content operating model. And what we base this around were co-creation foundations, which we've learned can be perceived and interpreted in many different ways, but also having really early cross-functional teams involved to make sure that whatever we are developing, when it gets downstream in the markets, can actually be leveraged. So as part of this co-creation effort, we really worked to define what co-creation means at Astellas, and made it very, very specific. So it was clear ways of working, clear expectations, whether you're in a global marketing role or whether you're a local affiliate, if you sit in a priority market or a non-priority market, and also how you use a lot of the global capabilities that we have within the organization, things like our global content factory, to bring those things to life. We obviously faced a little bit of challenges and a little bit of issue along the way. I think it's often hard to bring an organization together and kind of really make sure people understand what their role is on working together. But I'm happy to say we got there. One of the key outputs that we made explicit for the teams at Astellas was, when you are co-creating, what is the output that should be expected? And I think we're all familiar with the standard set of core materials that global teams usually present, your detail aid, email, set of banners, etc., right? But what we wanted was to really drive joint accountability between global and local teams, and the output of what we're calling a foundational content pack should be something that can be leveraged straight if that works for the market, and if not, we want to provide enough strategic messaging in there that makes sense from an omnichannel experience perspective that allows markets to then take it and create derivative content that works for them. We're in the early days of this, and we're getting our global core co-creation team set up. We've been really targeted in that approach and limited it to our priority markets who are really shaping what that messaging should be. Of course, not being blind to the fact that it's never going to work for everyone.
Yep.
Something we did a little bit differently was we made sure to include regulatory and medical affairs partners as we shaped this model, so that we could provide things like alternatives to really drive global uptake of the strategic messaging. But the way we executed that in practice is what I'm going to hand over to Hugh to talk about, because that's just the top layer.
Yeah, so it's great that you've really drawn a bit the frame in which we have to operate. And to your point, Hugh, how do we know?
Yeah, so our FCP, we love our acronyms. Our foundational content pack has been a great capability to help drive standardization across the way that we reuse and localize content. And I think there's a level of comfort that comes with the organization of really defining what that needs to be, and also a level of familiarity with the core tactics that our affiliates will localize and use. But the challenge that we have with these standard content types is they don't really drive our omnichannel experiences across multiple channels and multiple touch points. So we needed to pivot the way that we work so our content had more versatility.
Yep.
So to do that, we came up with a way of helping our brands think differently about the way they organize their messaging. We created a strategic messaging framework called the Omnichannel Engagement Framework, or to throw in another acronym, the OEF. And there's more. We have a ton of
There's
them.
a list if anyone needs a reference.
We have a whole glossary page.
Yeah. We still are learning
We
what
can
they
do a
are,
quiz
yeah.
about it.
Sometimes we make them up.
We could do a
yeah.
test.
Yeah, exactly,
Do you
later
remember
on.
what the OEF stands for? Anyway, so our OEF becomes a global framework that aligns messaging across customer experience. And to be more specific, what I mean by that, we can then start to plot out communication objectives against the different stages of the adoption ladder for different brands and different segments. So we can then start thinking about not only what you say to the right person at the right time, but also look for the opportunities of perhaps where you don't have messaging to deal with particular customers in particular focus. So it's been a great tool, and again, building on the aspects of global for local, it's allowed us to create some standardization with ways of working that makes messaging more strategic. Now, messaging is one thing, but how do we translate to content? So the content piece relates to us thinking differently about how we organize our content. I mentioned earlier the idea of versatility. So how do we ensure that when we have lots and lots of omnichannel journeys across different markets and segments, that we can support that across multiple touch points, across multiple channels. So liberating our content from the shackles of the EBA and ensuring that we can have something that plots across this strategic messaging framework. So that's why some of you may have been at the presentation earlier from BI. Michael talked a lot about the effort that they've gone to implementing modular content. So we see that as really driving those strategic messages. So hanging our modules off those strategic messaging is what's helped us to then start thinking about how that content can be reused over and over again across different customer touch points, across multiple customer journeys. So our messaging framework has given our modules meaning, but what gives it value is the collaboration with our MLR teams.
That's right in your court.
That's in my wheelhouse.
It's almost
yes.
like we practice. I know.
Not scripted at all. Yeah, I mean, so, I'm at UCB, and we have a very similar model to you guys at Astellas. It's not miles off, to be honest. As I mentioned, we're an MLR factory, so I have a little army of people dealing with MLR. Everything comes through my team, through the funnel. And I think the big thing for me is co-creation, so get your MLR team involved early so they can be involved, but really get them involved in the creation of these systems as well. So we very much, in my team, have great input into the governance of the actual systems, so the Viva Vault, your AI, your modular content. How is it going to work, and who needs to approve what when? So we've been a little bit more draconian with our modules and said, up front, we're going to approve these as modules or assets or claims, and they are generally unchangeable. The idea is that you plug and play regionally and locally. You don't want that churn at the regional level or the local level, because that's just more review for review's sake or tweaking for tweaking's sake, right? And often it's a marketeer locally that's like, well, I'd like to change this word because I think it's better. That's not a good use of anybody's time. So we're kind of doing that. I think the important thing to remember, and it's something as we discuss in these days about all the wonderful things that we can do with AI and all this content generation, is that we work in a legislative environment that's at least 2 decades behind where the technology is. So we're still required to upload final form content to the FDA, to the ABPI, to Italy, to Austria. And so when we think about kind of like end user content generation, we really need to think about how can we get it in a format and have as many pre-approved modules as possible, such that when we do create that content locally quickly, we can also approve it quickly, because we've seen it before, we're happy with it. And then it becomes down to, from there, then what's working, right? And then we get into the measurement of things. So.
Nicely orchestrated.
Nice segue. So I would like to share Novo Nordisk's journey on this content measurement. Before going into the depths of it, let me start by why we felt content measurement is key. So we celebrated 100 years last year, and out of that, 95 years we have been mono-channel, just doing IVAs, right? And just in the last 5 years, our customer interactions have increased 4 times. Our content volume stands at a 5-digit number today, and our global to local content use is a single-digit number. And our MLR approval time is a double-digit number in terms of days, right? Thank God, not yours. So with all this, one constant is here, that is the budget. That's not rising, it's rather declining. So there is a budget war always on why you guys why brand teams need so much content. So we really thought, okay, hey, we are developing so much of content. One dimension to look at it is we need to really know what we are producing, why we are producing this content, so we can be more efficient and more smarter in the way we approach this. The other obvious benefit is how our external customers actually perceive this content. So it's like a double benefit, right? So the journey for measurement in Novo started by, first of all, establishing what we call as a unified content taxonomy. This is super important. When I say content taxonomy, what I really mean is it's something called as a CSK's acronym, core categories, subcategories, and key messages. So brand teams are very used to creating key messages and testing it via market research for their core IVA or e-detail. No doubt it's useful, but in a blended customer engagement, you really need to create these key messages in a channel agnostic way and which is analytics friendly. That means your key messages should be short and not go on for 2 lines, right? And the core and the subcategories are pretty simple because think of and all the fad about this personalization, everybody wants to understand, hey, what kind of content is my HCP having this affinity towards? So whether it is a thriller genre or an action or a science fiction, you really need to have that common core category and subcategory. So you really know, okay, my stakeholders or my customers really like messages in the category called digital health or safety and efficacy and things like that. So we first of all established this unified content taxonomy, and then we educated our brand teams to tag them. And then that process is very interesting because the global teams did the tagging, and they're like, hey, but when can I see the results? Why am I not able to see what is used? And that's because the data needs to flow all the way to the anybody else who creates the content, also locally. And then there's a big battle at the local level, like, why should I use global key messages? I have a different key message. Then the whole alignment was to say that, guys, this is for analytics purpose. If you really need to measure, you need to be consistent. Yep. The data has to flow. Your data lake has only so much volume. And whether you call it Mexico or Mexico, based on your preference, it really doesn't matter because we all know it's one and the same. So it has to be unified. And if you feel something is missing, they say, oh, my messages on my festival Ramadan is missing. Okay, add it. For sure, you can add local key messages too. And then you need to make sure that the data flows into the data lake. This way, we have been very successful in bringing this whole content measurement journey in the upfront and to the attention of senior leaders, that there is a huge support for this initiative. And as a next stage, we are actually leveraging machine learning, AI, to do automated tagging. And this automated tagging will be within the degrees of freedom of the CSKs. So we're not going to go crazy and tag whatever we want. We're just going to load this and educate the machine that, OK, you need to tag safety and efficacy if you see certain set of parameters. So we are in that process. Very exciting. And with modular content, tagging is almost kind of granular, so you get more granular insights. So all those are some of the exciting initiatives in Novo.
So at the end of the day, what you're also describing is this whole iteration in enhancing, improving.
That's the next step, yeah. So once you have the data, which finally should flow in, you need to be able to feed that insights back into your strategic content
Yeah.
strategy, right? Like you mentioned about adoption ladder
Yeah.
and segmenting content based on the key message house and everything. So you need to know what works and what doesn't work.
Right. Well, that's kind of how ultimately, we want to start looking at the way that we measure the effectiveness of content, not how it's performed in a particular channel,
Yeah.
but how the message has resonated in relation to the ladder of adoption.
Yeah.
So these frameworks help us in the short term by executing our global for local strategies. But really in the long term, we kind of close that loop and start looking at how that message is performed, regardless of whether it was in the email, regardless of it was in the slide, and really see what's been effective in moving our customers along these different experiences. And I think that's where it's going to really start to come together. Obviously, we've got a lot of things to do to get to that place. And as you say, tagging is a really important part of that, ensure we have consistency about the way that we do things. But also, I think, there's sometimes a perception, I think, Gareth, we were talking about this earlier today, where that idea of use and reuse, because you create something at a global level, the expectation of implementing that at a market level isn't that you have to necessarily take it exactly word to word as it arrived, but take the essence of that global strategy and ensure that you provide the nuance and the cultural differentiation that you need, but maintaining that link to global strategy. And that's what this kind of framework allows us to do, is to start thinking about how we reuse and localize content effectively, but ultimately how we measure against some of the things that we're talking about.
And to mainly cater to the blended model, right? Because one of the biggest challenges also we face from the brand teams is my key messages are so important for my IVA, and in the back in the days it makes sense, because if you are a sales rep, I exactly know, I can read your reaction on that specific key message and I can record it, and actually I can, I know that I'm what works with you and what doesn't. But in the blended approach where digital engagements also come into play, it's really hard to understand and read reactions, and that's why tagging becomes, or measurement
Very
becomes
important.
so critical, right? And that education is needed also for the commercial teams.
And that's an interesting point I wanted to touch on, because at the end of the day, they are the vehicle to get the message across. And you also mentioned before, okay, you're also measuring how is this content consumed by the end receiver, in this case, the HCPs. How do you use that then exactly to get marketing more excited, the commercial team and the rep team more excited? Because we know there is sometimes resistance, but if you see that your content, as you mentioned, is appreciated, is anyone leveraging this kind of insights to really get more excitement internally?
I think there's two sides to the coin in measurement. We have effectiveness, how is it engaging with our customers? There's also how it's being reused. And I think ultimately, initially, what we can do is focus on those reuse numbers to show the benefits we have to the local teams, and also the benefits that brings to MLR.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I'm measuring constantly how much content is being used locally by how much is being generated. And to your point earlier, I think it's the education of the people to get them excited. In my area, in MLR, it's really getting them to understand you can approve or validate modules or assets on their own. So in MLR, very often they want to see it in context, right? Where does this image sit with this claim? Can those two things go together? And it's like, you'll get to see that down the line, but right now, all you need to say is, can I approve this claim? Can I talk about this claim? And is that okay? And that's a very different mindset shift. And when you have people's names attached to a regulatory body, like at the ABPI, they name your signatory, they get personally nervous. So I'm doing a lot of education and a lot of training and work with our teams to get them involved and understand it's okay. This is the direction we're going, and you need to be comfortable.
How have you created that comfort, Gareth, with the MLR reviews in that sense?
I would say that it's about understanding that they're not just these messages are not going to go out on their own. I mean, thrown out there, right? I think it's the comfort and understanding you're validating this message, but the final form you're still going to get to see. And it's just green wherever you've seen it before, and then a red box if it's something brand new. And that's where you need to focus your attention.
We're also tracking, you're saying, how do you keep track of all this? We have clear reuse dashboards we're putting together with our content operations team, and showing of the volume of global content that's developed, how much is actually being leveraged in relation to any net new content that's being developed globally or locally. As Hugh mentioned as well, the effectiveness of each of those pieces of content. And I think something we're starting to look at too, right, is getting them excited. Well, do we have triggers that are going to allow the next wave of content to be unlocked, right? And that's going to help us understand if we're moving people through a journey, which isn't going to be linear. There's going to be multiple micro journeys within one journey. But if we have the right content and the right triggers and the right data behind it all, we can see how they progress.
And one of the ways we excite the brand teams, especially locally, is showing them whether it is connected to their strategy of communication strategy, and we show the consistency in that approach. Like we take a specific problem that a particular affiliate wanted to educate our customers on the complex dosing, okay? And then we saw that through this content tagging, how that message is consistently delivered in this blended customer engagement approach, which makes the marketeers and the sales rep feel confident about the fact that they have nailed that messaging to the customers.
You see, with that, we have closed the circle and the time. So I think we can still have time for one question. Yes, there's a question.
Glad she has sneakers on. Thank you for this panel. One of the things that I find we constantly run into is the tracking of the usage of the content. How did you get over that barrier? Because we are always told like tracking the usage is somehow problematic from a compliance perspective. I fundamentally disagree with it. You guys are telling us it can be done. How did you get over that, or was that ever a hurdle for you?
So tracking the content use and reuse, right? I think, the traditional, sorry, I'm calling it traditional because the way we usually track is using promo mats, make a copy,
Exactly.
right? But for me, at least in Novo, I'm trying to change that a little bit by I'm going to track the claims used to reuse rate because I think that's a better metric to truly track your content use and reuse, and not just the frame of make a copy, because I can still make a copy and change everything inside, you know. So that is why the barrier is not there, at least for Novo.
From my side, it's aggregate data, so you don't track by doctor. You just say, in general, this is what's being done for Italy or for your region. I think once you get down to individual doctors, then you get nervous, right? And that's why the compliance steps in. But
Indeed.
aggregate.
It is interesting how you say about the evolution of this. You know, today we're looking at tracking the localization and reuse of tactics. I think as we move forward, start looking at the reuse of strategic messages of claims, and also, you know, the reuse of design standards, of templates that we build into the way that we're using. All of these things have intrinsic value. We just need to kind of capture and measure them differently.
Yeah, okay. So time is moving fast. This expert panel has made my life very easy, as you could witness. So thank you very much. And